And we're off. Chandler doesn't waste any time here, and you almost have to admire the guy. He's not waiting for the ref to say box or touch gloves. He's going straight for sweep the leg. CIT spent over 7 years interviewing countless witnesses, either who were at the Pentagon, at the Citgo gas station, at Arlington Cemetery, in the surrounding neighborhood. They even found a guy who was on a boat on the Potomac River who saw something out of the ordinary. But Chandler wants us to toss out all of that work based on the absurd idea that a Pentagon police officer who also had a lifetime of aviation experience somehow confused starboard and port in an email that he wrote in 2003. For reasons we can only speculate on, Chandler and the group of researchers that he works with have made it their mission to defend the government version of the event at the Pentagon on 9/11 as if their paycheck depended on it. Part of that mission includes smearing CIT at each and every opportunity. The criticism that you hear most often is that they're inexperienced researchers and poor interviewers. Chandler has described their interviews as carefully stage managed, with the goal of getting answers from their interview subjects that will support their flyover theory. Let's have a listen to Sergeant Lagasse's interview with Craig Ranke of CIT in 2006 at the Citgo gas station, and see if we can pick up on anything that Chandler is alluding to here.
Where did you see the plane coming from exactly? What direction? Did you see it approaching?
Where did you see the plane coming from? What direction? And did you see it approaching are hardly leading questions.
Well, I saw it, like I said, if we look here where Arlington Cemetery is, right about where those transformers are,
Yeah.
that's the first place I saw it. We cleared all these lampposts, or cleared all the light posts.
So it was heading towards you coming from Arlington Cemetery over there?
No. It was heading from left to right. It came from FOB2 area.
So you're saying it came from to the north side of the Navy Annex even?
Yes.
Sergeant Lagasse has clearly and unequivocally indicated that he saw the plane coming in on a flight path that was north of Citgo by literally pointing in the direction of Arlington Cemetery, which is north of Citgo. Just to be clear as well, Chandler does have some clips from the Pentagon, and he says so in his video, but he doesn't have any of these clips in his critique. Now, from that excerpt, we can certainly conclude that Craig Ranke wasn't guiding Sergeant Lagasse towards any particular answers. Sergeant Lagasse was doing most of the talking. But let's see if we can find something else where Craig Ranke gets up to something.
At what point of where did it cross over the station?
It never crossed over the station.
It never crossed over
No.
the station.
Dang, Craig Ranke, that was some medieval sorcery that would have made Marcellus Wallace proud. Ranke actually tried to trick him into giving him an answer that wouldn't support the flyover theory. CIT, you sneaky little Pete's. Alright, we're 5 minutes in here and we haven't even had a look at David's actual critique. So let's go have a look at that and see just how bad it actually is.
A few months ago, I did an analysis of the CIT group's interview with Sergeant William Lagasse.
This part is just Chandler telling people who don't know how to work the internet how to find the article on his website. He does this a couple times in the video, and we'll skip over it the next couple of times as well.
So here we are at the interview of Sergeant William Lagasse. Now, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, who Sergeant William Lagasse is, scroll down in this analysis to, let's see here, right here, Decoding the Pentagon, Smoking Gun Version.
Chandler wants you to know that this is the video that he's making reference to, where he gets all the Lagasse interviews from, but he certainly leaves some key moments out, like the excerpt that we looked at the beginning of this video, as well as a few more that I'm going to include. And you can decide whether or not Chandler left them out on purpose or not.
CIT has produced these video interviews of a number of people. They're claiming that they give a path of the plane that's contrary to the official path.
Chandler seems to be very confused about what a claim is. CIT is not claiming that they give a contrary path. As a matter of fact, they're not making a claim at all. They are presenting filmed interviews from eyewitnesses to the event on 9/11 from the location where they witnessed the event.
Bottom line is, it's contrary to the path that contains all the evidence. And the significance of that is the plane could not have produced all of the damage that we see. So all of the light poles, the damage inside the Pentagon, everything is lined up along a path that goes south of the Citgo gas station. However, these people who were at the Citgo gas station tell a story that indicates the plane came in along a different path.
We should take note of the way Chandler is referring to the eyewitnesses now, calling them these people and saying that they tell a story, instead of 2 Pentagon police officers, an air traffic controller, several Arlington Cemetery employees, among others. It's a recurring theme for Chandler to try to diminish the witnesses and the evidence.
Therefore, the plane never touched anything. Somehow it must have flown over the Pentagon, hidden by a cloud of smoke from an explosion of some sort. And then all the damage, every bit of the damage, was faked, was staged.
It's not hard to pick up the incredulity in Chandler's voice, but whether or not he finds this scenario believable or not is irrelevant.
William Lagasse is pretty much their star witness. He's the one they rely on to give the most convincing account of this scenario.
CIT interviewed numerous witnesses, and the only one who refers to Lagasse as the star witness is David Chandler. Is he one of the stronger witnesses? Sure, but he's by no means the foundation of the house of cards that falls down without him. Air traffic controller Sean Boger could certainly compete for the title of star witness since he was in the heliport and saw the plane coming directly at him that day. His interview with Aldo Marquis was so poorly stage managed that he couldn't wait for him to finish asking a question to tell him that he saw the plane coming in north of Citgo.
Say it was on the left. As you're looking at the gas station, would it be more to the right, like the Arlington Cemetery side, or would it have been
on my right and the gas station's left? If I'm looking out the window, if I'm looking towards the gas station, it'll be on my right-hand side.
Sergeant Chad Brooks was another Pentagon police officer who happened to be at the Citgo that day and was also interviewed the same day that Sergeant Lagasse was. Chandler claims in another video that Brooks was so close to the southern flight path that the shadow of the plane actually covered him as it flew over him. Yet Brooks remembers seeing the plane fly in the same place that Lagasse did, north of Citgo.
Okay, was it more on the, when we're facing the station, more on the north side or to the left?
No, it was more to the left.
More to the left, okay. And was the plane, the entire plane to the left of the station, or maybe portion of it over the canopy of the station?
No, it was more towards the left.
It was the entire plane was to the left station, the wing and everything.
Correct.
Okay.
I have this illustration later in the article that shows the Navy Annex here on the left. This white building over here is the Pentagon, and the red line here is the line through the downed light poles. The incoming plane knocked down these light poles and went into the building. Here's the Citgo gas station, and up here at the top is the Arlington National Cemetery. And down here, the road that comes along the south edge of the Navy Annex is Columbia Pike. So that's a little basic geography. Notice we have here a freeway overpass. Here's Highway 27. The plane came right in over that overpass. And here are the downed light poles. And then there was a generator trailer right in front of the Pentagon, right ahead of where the plane impacted the building. Now you can see that if you come in north of the Citgo station, you miss all those light poles. You hit the Pentagon at the wrong angle, so it doesn't coincide with the damage path inside. The CIT group gets around that by...
Maybe Chandler will let us know, in the meantime, how he gets around the list of witnesses, which has grown to over 60, who saw the plane fly in on a path north of Citgo.
Saying that the plane flew over, and there was an explosion that occurred here that created a smoke cloud which hid the plane from view, and fooled everybody into thinking that it hit the building when in fact it flew over the building. I don't think that's plausible at all.
Once again, whether or not Chandler finds that plausible or not is not evidence for anything except his own lack of imagination. As my dad used to tell me, that and $1.25 will get you on the Fairfax Connector.
Because it would have hit the building prior to the explosion, but whatever.
I was going to let this one go, but I just can't. If the plane flew over the building, then it wouldn't have hit the building prior to the explosion because it flew over the building.
That's their theory. I'm not going to just argue on plausibility. We're going to look at some more significant data along the way. Okay, I mentioned here that I had an interesting encounter with Aldo Marquis on the Truth and Shadows blog. It was in the comments section under an article there. Down a little bit here, he says, "Remember, this all started because in 2003, a very pissed off Sergeant Lagasse, who believed there was an airliner that struck the Pentagon, told researcher Dick Eastman that he was on the starboard side of the plane while he was refueling at the Citgo. This is what started me researching what he saw. This is what drove me to fly out to Arlington with the loose change crew and confirm or refute what he saw."
What's not surprising is that Chandler doesn't mention that he replied to Aldo Marquis in that same thread. Let's have a look at it and see if we can figure out why he might not want other people to know that. Well, would you look at that? Ad hominem, evidence-free accusations, and then accusing the other side of that which you are guilty. It's the dishonesty trifecta. Now, I don't know if it gets better or worse for Chandler here, but any young aspiring journalists who are listening should sit up and take note, because Chandler is about to drop some serious knowledge on how to conduct an investigative interview. Just to quickly preface this, Aldo had asked Chandler how many witnesses he had interviewed who had been on site, and this is what Chandler wrote. "I would not interview any of the witnesses about which side of the Citgo they saw the plane." Now already, I'm sure you're in a little bit of awe with the technique that Chandler is advising here to not ask the witnesses where they saw the plane, but it's the next part where he really shows his mettle as a true top-notch investigator. Chandler writes, "I would ask any witnesses what they saw." Clearly Chandler has some experience in the area, but let's move on and see what else he has to say about this exchange.
And so they flew back to Washington and somehow rounded up these people to have interviews, presumably at the place they were on 9/11.
Oh, did Chandler just say a couple more sentences? That must mean it's time to point out some more dishonesty. There isn't any doubt about whether or not these interviews took place, and CIT didn't perform any magic tricks in finding these witnesses. Chandler can simply take out presumably and somehow from that last sentence and say they found some witnesses and interviewed them in the location where they were on 9/11.
Okay, there's some interesting things about this email exchange. In particular, it starts off with Lagasse writing to Eastman, and he starts off, "Dear Sir, rest assured it was a Boeing 757 that flew into the building that day. I was on duty as a Pentagon police sergeant. I was refueling my vehicle at the Barracks K gas station that day." That's another name for the Citgo gas station. It changed names a few times. "It was close enough that I could see the windows had shades pulled down. It struck several light poles next to Route 27 and struck a trailer used to store construction equipment for the renovation. It was to the right of the fuselage impact point. The fact that you are insinuating that this was staged and a fraud is unbelievable. You ask where the debris is. Well, it was in the building. I saw it everywhere. I swear to God, you people piss me off no end," and so forth. So, Lagasse is clearly testifying to a plane that actually knocked down the light poles and actually hit the generator trailer and actually penetrated the building.
Well, that's not actually what he's testifying to. Lagasse has never claimed to have seen the light poles knocked over. He couldn't see the engine's impact with the generator trailer from his vantage point, and as for whether or not he actually saw the aircraft enter the building, as Chandler would say, let's file that one away.
So what Aldo is saying about this correspondence was that somewhere in here, Lagasse says he was on the starboard side of the plane. So let's find that. So I'm going to do a search. And it turns out the first reference to starboard is in the email to Sergeant Lagasse from Dick Eastman. Okay, and so Dick Eastman says, several people saw the shades pulled down. Were you looking at the port, left, or starboard side? And so forth. So that was the first use of the term. So the next occurrence is where Lagasse is writing back to Eastman. Now, I think what you're going to find as you go through listening to all of this is that Sergeant Lagasse is the kind of guy who likes to use official sounding jargon whenever he has the opportunity. I notice in particular, right here, AGL. What is AGL? Well, that's above ground level. So he's talking here about the height of the plane is 100 to 150 feet AGL. So that's the kind of vocabulary he likes to use. And so now that Dick Eastman has introduced the word starboard, he's going to use the word too. Well, let's see what he says. It says, there was a severe yaw into the building with the starboard side of the cockpit actually hitting at about the same time the wing was involved with the trailer.
Okay, we're really getting into one flew over the cuckoo's nest territory. The way that Lagasse has described seeing the plane approach and hit the Pentagon is the same way that Chandler has been trying to convince everybody for the last 15 years that the plane approached and hit the Pentagon. So ordinarily at this point, Chandler would be able to take his ball and go home because he would also say that the starboard side of the cockpit hit the Pentagon. But instead it creates a real conundrum for him because if Lagasse meant starboard when he said starboard, then that also means that the plane flew in front of him when he was standing at the Citgo gas station. So Chandler has to come up with something. And that something is, well, let's just listen to him explain it.
Okay, we have the plane coming into the building. The right wing engages with the generator trailer. In fact, it's the engine of the right wing that catches on the generator trailer. It creates a huge gash. But in Lagasse's mind, remember, I'm not dealing here with the reality. I'm dealing with what he had in mind, trying to understand the words he's using.
Chandler doesn't have to interpret the words that Lagasse is using in any other way than how he is using them. He said that the starboard side of the cockpit hit the building first. Based on absolutely no evidence at all, Chandler has come up with the premise that Lagasse confused starboard and port in that email, and then concocted a scenario. Well, let's just let Chandler explain it again.
There was a severe yaw into the building with the starboard side of the cockpit actually hitting at about the same time the wing was involved with the trailer. So he sees the wing hung up on the trailer and the plane swinging around so that the starboard side of the cockpit hits first. So here's what that would look like.
Well, sure, that's what it would look like, but that's not what it did look like. Chandler is saying that this whole hallucination that he's created in Lagasse's mind was triggered by Lagasse seeing the airplane's engine hung up on the trailer. Of course, this temporary generator trailer wouldn't have any effect on the plane whatsoever, but let's go back and look at that email to Dick Eastman and see what Chandler has to say about this. Okay, so here's that email to Dick Eastman. Where is that? Where is it? Oh, that's right. Chandler hadn't scrolled down far enough for us to see it. The trailer, where is it? Okay, here it is. Let's blow that up a little bit so we can read it. Chandler writes, how and where the trailer was struck, I can't speak of because Route 27 blocked my view slightly to the right because it's elevated. So in fact, he didn't see the engine engage with the generator trailer. That pretty much renders moot the rest of this episode of Lagasse's Imagination Gone Wild, But let's go ahead and keep listening to this absurd scenario so we can put it out of its misery.
And notice that in order to get the right wing pulled back, you're talking about a clockwise rotation. It's actually the driver's side, so to speak, the pilot's side of the cockpit. That's the left side hitting the wall first because the plane has been rotated around.
Oh, I see. It's so simple now. The plane has just been rotated around. Well, while we're exploring Lagasse's wild imagination, let's have a look at a model that is a bit more realistic than Chandler's doodling and see what the movement of the plane would have actually looked like in Lagasse's imagination running wild. Well, first of all, in Chandler's drawing, he's got the plane coming in about 30 degrees shy of what the official path states. And that's by design, of course, and you'll see why. According to the official path, the plane came in at 42 degrees, and that's how it's depicted in this animation. Remember, Lagasse said that the starboard side hit first, but this poses a real problem for Chandler, as I pointed out earlier. So he tells us that in Lagasse's imagination, it's spun around in such a manner that the left side of the cockpit hit first, because when he said starboard, he actually meant port. Chandler has it impacting at around 30 degrees in his doodle, and that curved line is the path that the tail would have had to follow if the plane itself did indeed rotate over 70 degrees, as Chandler is claiming happened in Lagasse's mind. With the plane being about 155 feet long, that means that the tail of the airplane would have had to travel the length of 1.5 football fields before the plane struck the building. That sounds like it could be possible until you remember that the time between the engine striking the generator and the plane striking the Pentagon was 0.8 seconds. Let's speed the animation up to 0.8 seconds and see what that looks like. But enough with all this technical talk. Let's get back into the fantastical mind of William Lagasse as interpreted by Chandler the Magnificent.
If it hadn't hit the generator trailer, it would have been the right side of the cockpit that would have hit first. And what we're seeing here is the rotation causes the left side to hit.
Despite his previous disclaimers, Chandler has given up all pretense of describing what's happening in these two doodles as something that he's only claiming happened in Lagasse's imagination.
Therefore, what we can conclude is that Lagasse has it backwards. What he's thinking of is starboard means the left side.
No, we cannot therefore conclude that Lagasse has it backwards and he means the left side when he says starboard. This is just an argument from false premise. He started with the idea that Lagasse confused starboard and port, then illustrated a scenario with some fancy drawings showing what it would look like if this were actually true, and used that to come to the conclusion that his premise was true in the first place. We are going to stop right there for now, but in the next part, we're going to have a look at Lagasse's on-site interview with Citizen Investigation Team when he literally points in the direction of Arlington Cemetery north of Citgo to indicate where he first saw the plane that supposedly crashed into the Pentagon.